Well, we have neighborhood restaurant groups. Greg Engert, he is the beer director at Birch and Barley and Rustico, and actually the first ever beer sommelier to be featured in Food and Wine magazine.
Will you sign my thigh later? Thank you.
But he is in to talk with us today, not about beer, but about cider. Who knew? Who knew there were so many ciders?
There's no beer?
No beer.
I'm out of here.
Goodbye. Okay, I'll do the show
Call my
by
agent.
myself.
I don't have an agent.
All right, so you are the beer guru. Tell us ciders?
Yeah, it's funny. I think when I was starting to get into beer and researching the different traditions of beer making, both stateside and internationally, I noticed that a lot of these pubs and breweries would be serving cider alongside their beers, and breweries would be situated among cider houses, particularly in Normandy and France, and then Herefordshire and England, and then of course in the United States, where cider was more popular than beer.
Back up for just a second. I mean, when you say cider, I just go to like that unfiltered, murky apple cider that they sell at the farm stand.
Apple juice with goop.
Right. Well, that's what this is, except it's adult murky brown cider, so it's fermented.
It sounds delicious.
Pour it now.
Is that where they say cider houses rule? I had to say that. Get it?
No.
Never mind. Go ahead, Greg.
Okay, so explain it. How is it different from juice?
Okay, so basically we press. Well, first we make pulp out of the apple, or in this case, the one I opened just now is pears. Actually, it's called poire, and it's from Normandy. What we do is we scrat the apple, which makes it into pulp. Sometimes we'll
Wait, what's scrat?
Scratting is just the old term for literally pulverizing and mashing up the apples. If you want to get some color, we'll macerate the liquid a little bit to bring in some of the skin. In this case, this hasn't happened.
Can't you just say squish and mess up?
And then after we scrat the pulp, then we're going to press. And it's cool. They actually use a lot of these traditional cider houses will actually wrap the pulp in something that looks like a cheesecloth, and they call it the cheese. And then you press it through, so you extract all the juices from the apple or pear, and then you literally either add yeast or rely on the yeast strains that have come in on the skins of the apple, much like with grapes.
Like, because of the pectin, you mean, like from the apple? Is that what does it?
Think about, there's wild yeast and bacteria around us all the time, and they love sugar. So they're going to attract themselves to the skin of sugared fruits as they're maturing. So when we press in, a lot of these yeasts are going to come in. And then in the most traditional ways, you'll just rely on those yeasts at ambient temperatures to begin to consume the sugars, producing alcohol, some carbon dioxide, and of course, wonderful fermentation flavors.
Well, that sounds very scientific, but I think the key word there is alcohol.
Yes,
for my husband, it is.
So
8%.
Yeah?
8% alcohol, between that and juice,
Okay.
But this one's 4%.
This is and what are we drinking?
This is from Christian Drouin. He's a cider and perry or poire maker from Normandy. This is really cool. It shows you that just like wine, they care about the varietals.
This tastes nothing like cider.
No.
Nothing at all. I mean, it's not
wait a minute,
sweet.
but
It's so clean.
When I give the kids apple cider, they're drinking alcohol.
No,
too.
No, that's just juice, just pressed. It's everything besides that last step of adding of inducing fermentation.
I was hoping it would induce sleep. Apparently not.
But this is the pear one?
Yeah, this is pear. So this is actually 60% of this is something called Plant de Blanc, which is a really nice balanced pear from Normandy. It also has Muscadet and Tricotin, which are two sweeter varietals of pears, and then some sharpness and acidity is brought in by Avenel and Poire de Gris, which is two kind of, we call bitter sharp varietals that bring in acid. So just like with wine, they're blending here to get a balance going, and that's why it kind of has that nice dryness and touch of acidity in the finish.
Well, it is dry. It's not nearly as sweet as you would think it would be by the description.
If you get an apple cider that's sweet, typically that means that it's been pasteurized and then sweetened on top, because yeast consumes most of the sugar, so it should be dry.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, we got to see you yesterday, too. We were at that fabulous event, the Vices for
amazing,
Virginia. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about Acadia?
Sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I mean, Arcadia is basically our not-for-profit wing of the neighborhood restaurant group now that's joining up with Woodlawn Estate, which is part of George Washington's huge sprawling estate,
was
the
so
lesser known Mount Vernon.
Right.
But they've got tons of acreage out there, and we hope to kind of return it to its former glory, making it into a workable farm that can supply restaurants and people locally. And I think down the road, a real idea is helping with distribution. I mean, Michael Babin, who's the one of the owners of our restaurant group, this is really his passion, and he wants to see local, sustainable food available to everyone, and making this not just at the farmers markets or for the urbane, but everywhere. This is kind of our first step towards that.
Well, that was an awesome event, but he said the key word. He said
did,
sustainable.
which is
Segue.
Perfect segue without being prompted. So we have in studio with us this morning Deborah Krasner. She wrote a fantastic book called Good Meat, but this is not your usual steak cookbook. This is very, very different. And, Deborah, just so you know, we have brought in over the last 2 years different people from Kim O'Donnell to farmers and people from farmers markets and
marine biologists.
I mean, really talking about sourcing locally and the differences between grass-fed. And so your book is really an encyclopedia to show people how to use all these products. How did you get started in it?
There were a number of things that got me going. The first was increasingly noticing meat at the farmer's market, where you used to just be able to get produce and fruit, and now there was meat. And I started buying that meat, and it tasted wonderful. And then I started learning that I could buy that meat in quantity from those farmers instead of by the piece. And I started doing that. And then in the course of doing that, my husband discovered that he had high cholesterol, but I'd already ordered half a cow and half a... And I said, honey, you're eating what I bought. And so...
I like your way of thinking.
Exactly.
Do what I say.
Right. So he gave up butter and he gave up desserts, but we ate a lot of meat. And at that point, I still trusted that I had to finish that meat within a year. I no longer feel that's the case, but that's the official rule, is you need a year, no more than a year in your freezer. And so we were eating a lot of meat. And at the end of the year, he got his blood tested again, and his LDL had gone down 40 points.
It's amazing.
Just amazing. And it was entirely because of the grass-fed and pastured meat. And there's a lot of evidence that shows that, in fact, this is the case. So I thought, bingo, that's really interesting. And then I host culinary vacations in Vermont and in Italy, and my culinary guests eat my local meat. And they're always, so enthusiastic about it. It tastes like Italy. It tastes like France. It tastes like the meat they had when they were kids. And sometimes they would go to my farmers and ask if they could have it shipped back to where they came from. And of course, the farmer said, no, we don't do that.
Right.
So one of my guests from Minnesota went home, went to her farmer's market, found a beef dealer, got his website and sent it to me and said, is this the same as your beef? And it was exactly the same protocol. And that's when I realized that this was not a kind of bubble in Vermont, but that it was national. And then I discovered a website called eatwild.com, where you can click on your state and scroll down and see farmer after farmer after farmer ready to sell you directly the products that they grow.
Cool.
So that's what started me. I realized everybody could do this, and everybody could eat well. And if you buy it in quantity, you can eat well at an economical price.
Well, I want to back up a little bit, because when you say meat, I mean, people right away think of cows, but you're not talking about just cows. I mean, you're talking about a variety of...
Well, pigs, chickens, even down to eggs.
Right, because all of the animals that live outdoors, let's go back and talk about what is sustainable meat.
Well, that's where I was going to go, right.
Okay, so sustainable meat comes from animals that are raised traditionally on grass in the way in which they have always been raised, not in feedlots, not in concentrated cages, but in balance with the land. So with cows, for example, what's done is something called mob grazing, where an appropriate number of cows are on an appropriately sized piece of pasture. They eat down the tips of the grass. Their waste is distributed evenly over that area of pasture. And then sometimes many times a day, sometimes every 24 hours, depending on the number of cows and how big the pasture is, they're moved onto the next pasture. And they go eagerly because they're eager for that fresh grass. And they rotate around over and over until they come back to that first pasture, which has now renewed itself.
Right.
They wouldn't go eagerly if they knew what was at the end of the line. But cows are stupid.
But they're cute.
All right, so,
But so how does it? So that is considered sustainable, and that is considered grass-fed.
That's right.
But what about like pigs and rabbits and chicken? How does that apply?
Well, all of these animals are raised with enough space out of doors in a way that allows them to express their full animalness, their full character.
what do chickens eat?
Chickens eat grass, remarkably, and bugs. And they also eat grains, and what we feed our chickens are the vegetable culls from the local stores. And they love dried pasta. They love bread. I mean, they'll eat...
Chickens are Italian.
Yeah, chickens are omnivores.
You're not going to cut off of my head.
All right. Well, why don't you then? Can we explain the differences though between conventional, what we see in our supermarkets, and what we're buying at our farmers markets?
Okay. What we see in the supermarket is industrial meat. It's meat that is actually giving us what we've asked for. I really feel that we have to take responsibility for the fact that as a culture we've asked for cheap meat, and we've gotten it. And I think that if we want things to change, we have to ask for something else. So industrial meat starts off on grass in what are called calf-to-cow operations, or cow-to-calf operations, where the calves and their moms are on grass, and at a certain point, those calves are shipped to a feedlot to be finished. And that means that tens of thousands of cows from all over the country are put together in confined areas where they're kind of fed enormous amounts of food, which is designed to make them get fat fast, and to create marbling, which we have been told is good, is a sign of tasty meat, and they're fed a diet of corn, which is really inappropriate for ruminants, and so they develop stomach ulcers. They have to be fed antibiotics in order to stay alive, both because of the diet that they're given and because they're so crowded in these unspeakably smelly and concentration camp-like places.
Deborah, hold that bad thought, because we have to take a quick break.
Okay, so before you run down to your
I'll never go to McDonald's again.
Before you run down to the farmer's market to go get this week of meat, we have to take a quick break. This is David and Nikki Nellis with Foodie and the Beast. When we come back, we're going to tell you what to do with that locally sourced meat.